I want to give you my thoughts on the new Canon EOS R mirrorless camera. First off, I am so excited for that to come out because what that does is it forces other manufacturers like Sony and Fuji, people that have been doing this for a while, to keep Canon and Nikon in the back of their mind as they are developing their new cameras. No matter what the brand, a mirrorless camera is pretty much always lighter and smaller than a camera with a mirror and a prism in it. And that's because a mirrorless camera just doesn't need a mirror. It gives you the image preview through an electronic viewfinder, which is basically a screen in the back of the camera. It's basically the same thing as this, it's just shrunk down and it's in the viewfinder. So there's no mirror, so it saves a lot of room and a lot of weight. You might be wondering what the big deal is about saving a pound of weight. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're using a gimbal for shooting video, it is a big deal. When I shoot video with my gimbal and I have my full frame Nikon on there, I'm very limited in the number of lenses I can use. I could get a big two-handed gimbal, but I don't want something that big with me all day long. I don't want to be sitting in a church pew with this giant gimbal like this. I like the one-handed small gimbals. They're just easier to maneuver, less obnoxious, and just easier to handle. So if I have a smaller camera on the gimbal, I can use a bigger lens and I can get more of what I'm looking for. Another advantage of a mirrorless camera is that you can see what your image is going to look like before you take it. So with an optical viewfinder, the light's coming in your lens, bouncing off the mirror, around the prism, and out the viewfinder. It doesn't take any batteries, it doesn't require any power, it's just optical. But with an electronic viewfinder that's found in mirrorless cameras, it's exactly what your lens and your sensor sees. So if your image is going to be too dark, your electronic viewfinder will show you that it's going to be too dark, and you can adjust before you take the picture. But going back to the Canon EOS R and why you should get it over the Nikon Z6 or Z7 is very simple. If you have Canon glass, get a Canon mirrorless camera. If you have Nikon glass, get a Nikon mirrorless camera. The two cameras are very similar, and of course they have their strengths and weaknesses, and you can argue about those if you want to. But if you know how to use a camera, you're going to get good images no matter what. There was a time last year where I actually forgot my digital camera on an engagement shoot. I shot the whole thing on film and the client never even knew it. The camera isn't what gives you the best images, it's how you use it and especially how you edit your images. So I don't like it when people get really caught up on the specs of the camera and this camera can go one stop higher with its ISO, this one shoots 2 more frames per second. In reality, I don't go to the maximum ISO pretty much ever on a wedding day. I might shoot at 6400 ISO during a dark reception or a dark ceremony, but any camera that's made in 2018 can handle 6400 ISO. So I'm not getting caught up on the frames per second or the ISO. I don't ever shoot 12 frames per second. I don't ever shoot 7 frames per second when I'm shooting a wedding. And if you're shooting sports, you're probably not going to go with a mirrorless camera right now because the autofocus isn't quite where the mirrored traditional DSLR cameras are yet. Autofocus is the biggest hang up for me right now with the Canon camera and the Nikon camera because I know it just can't keep up with my Nikon D750. My D750 rarely misses a shot. It can track almost all over the frame, and I know that the Canon and Nikon cameras have more focus points, but they're just not as accurate, they're not as fast, and they need more light to operate. So overall, don't get hung up on the specs that you're reading on paper. Go shoot with the camera and use it. If you can get good images with a Canon camera, you can get good images with a Nikon camera. I've shot with Nikon full frame, Canon full frame. I've used Sony when I've been shooting weddings with people that use Sony. They're all very capable. It's 2018. There's not crazy differences between these cameras, and your client will never know. You might be able to tell, but I promise your client isn't going to know if your camera can go one stop higher with your ISO or if it shoots an extra frame per second. What matters is what glass do you have, what are you used to using, what system has worked for you in the past. If you want to switch systems just to re-inspire yourself and get excited again, then switch systems. But if you've been working with something like I have for over 10 years and you're happy with it and your clients are happy with it and you're providing for your family using this system, there's really no need to switch because all of them are so similar. It's back and forth. Nikon announces a mirrorless camera, then Canon will, and then I'm sure that Fuji's gonna announce a new one soon after that. So will I buy a mirrorless camera? The answer is probably yes. Will I buy the EOS R or the Z6? I'm gonna buy the Nikon camera because I have Nikon glass. Does that mean the Nikon camera is better? Not necessarily. It means I have Nikon glass and it's going to fit my needs. I want to be able to put more lenses on my gimbal, and I want to have a small light camera just to carry around and do family stuff with, to do small shoots, just to have with me. I think a small light camera is pretty attractive, and for $2,000 in camera terms, that's not a ton of money. I make my living doing this. I do about 4 or 5 shoots a week. So having another camera body is awesome because my wife will be shooting somewhere and I'll be shooting somewhere, and we both have 2 cameras, and I can use a new mirrorless camera because I do this full time. If you don't do this full time, if you are a hobbyist photographer, then it might not be an advantage to get a mirrorless camera, and you don't need one. My point is that the camera is not going to make you a better photographer. It's not going to make you more money. You just have to learn to use what you have and don't get caught up on the specs. Just go out and shoot and maybe spend some money on marketing or learn how to run a business rather than buying new gear. Thank you guys for watching this. I plan to review the Nikon Z6 in November when I pick it up, and I'll let you know more about my thoughts on the autofocus points, the battery life, everything like that. But until then, just keep shooting and keep arguing on YouTube if you're into that, but I'm not gonna get caught up in that because I make my living doing this. My clients love what I do, and I'm perfectly happy with my work and I enjoy it. So thanks for watching.